a package. Anyways, oh my god, I'm out of breath. Hey guys, it's me. So I'm going to be ranting, not reviewing, ranting about the third book in the Den of Shadows Quartet collection that I have been reading. This book was just so boring. I did not really retain any information of what happened. I had to make notes basically of like, oh, this happened, because I could not remember for the life of me what was going on in this book. So let's get into it. All right, quick synopsis of the book. The book follows Sarah Vida, who is the daughter of Dominique Vida from the second book, Demon in My View. That's where she was introduced. Not Sarah, just her mother. So Sarah ends up getting harmed, going to school, meeting two blood-related vampires, Christopher and Nisa. And I'm not gonna lie, every time I read Nisa's name, I thought Nisan. I have no idea why, but I thought it. So then she is basically looking for a vampire that's really dangerous named Nicholas, and she's trying to find him to stop his evil reign. And that's a synopsis. That is all we get. So the story starts off with Sarah, and she is following a fledgling of Nicholas, and she's trying to get her hands on him to so she could fight him and prove to her mother that she is worthy of being a vampire hunter / part of the Vida witch line. There is also a cameo of Karen. Karen was one of the characters from Demon in My View. She actually seems a little older, and there's no indication of a time jump or Jessica or Aubrey or of anything Karen happened. What I do like about the beginning of the story is that we stick to just one character. And the last book, Demon in My View, we were jumping from character to character to character, like 3 different POVs. But surprisingly, Amelia just focuses on Sarah until it's necessary to move on to Sarah's sister, Adiana. Now, as Sarah gets into the house where all the vampires are and they're all feeding off of these willing humans, she ends up killing a no-name vampire, and then she realizes that Nicholas is not there. So then she ends up crashing into another vampire that's really super powerful named Kalos. And the way she was talking about Kalos, you would think that he was actually one of the main villains of the story, but he wasn't. So after getting her ass handed to her, Sarah ends up going back to her place where Karen's at, and Karen is healing her. And then we come to find out that witches heal faster than humans, but not as fast as vampires, so she has to wear a cast. Introduced to a hospital called Single Earth, and it's a safe haven for all of the paranormal monsters to be there and be in harmony. For example, a lot of vampires do not feed off of humans. There are humans that live in the hospital that will let the vampires feed off of them, but vampires could only take like a certain amount of their blood. It's indicated that a lot of vampire shifters and witches don't like the old way, so that's why they stay at Single Earth Hospital, because they want to unite everyone as one. So this is where it confused me, because it didn't really tell us if there was a jump. Now this book does not say how many years pass from Demon in My View to Shattered Mirror, and I'm just like, I don't like that. I want to know, because in my mind, Jessica and Aubrey, their situation just happened a month ago to me. And then what also upset me is that in this book, there are mentions of familiars, witches' familiars, and in book 2 there was no mentions of that, and I was like, what? And they're just mentioned. We don't see any familiars. They are just mentioned, and I'm like, Amelia, come on. This book is written 2 years after the first one, 1 year after the second one. Your writing style should have grown. So while Sarah is getting healed by Karen, her mother comes, and Dominique is kind of a bitch, and then we get a background history on her father and why her mother is so cold and callous, because I guess her father was murdered by a whole bunch of vampires and stumbled upon his body and then kind of went crazy, and then Dominique punished her because she lost her emotions. And I'm like, damn, she was only 6 or 7 years old. So when we get to the next chapter where Jessica goes to school, we are told that there are a lot of vampires there. I was just like, this is so dumb. It's never explained why the vampires went back to school. Like with Nicholas and Nisa, they never explain why they went back to school. at all. And I'm just like, why do you even want to go back to school? Like, you guys are over 100 years old. To me, it's really dumb. I hate that idea that vampires, especially if they're like 300, 400, 100 years old and they go back to high school, it's like, if you want that experience, go to fucking college. So the next few chapters, we see that Sarah ends up not becoming friends with Christopher the vampire or his sister Nisa. More like she's just tolerating them because she's pretending to be human. And then Christopher really starts giving her like drawings of herself and poems to Sarah. And then Sarah's like, she doesn't like it, but she doesn't give clear boundaries to Christopher. She doesn't like tell him, hey, you need to stop this because I'm not really interested. She just keeps letting him do that. And I'm just like, if you're not interested, you should tell the kid. So the next few chapters, we see them kind of develop a relationship, I guess. I don't know. We don't really get Sarah talking about Nicholas or anything like that. But then we do meet a character named Robert who does not like Sarah whatsoever. And she's actually really surprised that he doesn't like her because so many boys gives her phone numbers and he just did not even pay attention to her at all, and she was questioning that and questioning if he was a bad guy because of that. And we find out that there is a dance coming up and Christopher invites Sarah to it, and she's like, oh, I don't know, because I have to celebrate Halloween with my mom because of witch culture. But she doesn't say that, but she just lies because she's hiding she's a witch from Christopher. And he is like, oh, come on. And I was like, girl, you are like, throughout the chapter, she really tells the readers that she doesn't like Christopher. But here she is, like, debating whether to go for him. And I'm like, make up your damn mind because this is really boring. So then she ends up going to the dance and dancing with Christopher. And then she stops dancing with him because she sees her sister. And she was like, oh my god, I can't do this. And Christopher's like, what are you talking about? And then she ends up running off after her sister, and her sister gets mad at her. Like, why are you dancing with those leeches? And that's what they call vampires, leeches. And I'm just like, oh my god. And then they have like this dramatic like sister argument, and then Adiana like runs off, and then Christopher comes out, and this is like the part where Sarah's like, I gotta be truthful to him. I gotta tell him that I'm a witch and he can't be around me. So she basically tells him that he should leave her alone. He shouldn't talk to her. He shouldn't come near her. And he's like, okay, noted. And he's about to walk away. And she's like, Christopher, wait. And he's like, walking away. She's like, Christopher, wait. Christopher, wait. I'm like, you told him to leave you alone. You gave clear boundaries. And when he is walking away, you are stopping him. And even Christopher's like, you told me to stay away from you. You told me not to talk to you. And she was like, let me tell you why. Let me give you the reason why. And then she tells him everything. And I'm like, why do you even care about this boy? Throughout the chapters that we were reading, we weren't even told if they hung out after school, or if they hung out of class, or if they even built a friendship. This is where I was really confused, because there were no hints or sentences telling the readers that they built a relationship. And it wasn't believable to me. It was just a cringy, dramatic scene with a teenager and a vampire. Then when she tells Christopher everything, that she's a witch and everything, he's like, you don't seem the type. And as soon as he says that, she grabs him by the throat and slams him against the wall to prove her strength or something. I don't know. I'm just like, oh my god, what are you doing? Did you not just like tell the audience that you cared about him a few minutes ago? So then after that, they end up going their separate ways. And in the same night, Sarah leaves to Single Earth hospital, and then she meets Christopher there because he is bringing a human girl that got beat by a vampire. And then Sarah's all like telling the readers that she can't trust Christopher because it was a possibility that he did that to the human. And then we get a glimpse or a hint that we're back on the normal plot line because Nicholas is brought up. And I'm just like, okay, fucking finally, let's get to it. But no, her and Christopher have another cringy conversation. And then Christopher's like, did you think I did this to her? Talking about the human being beaten. And then Jessica straight up tells the readers, no, Christopher wouldn't do this. This isn't like him. And I'm like, bitch, just a few pages ago, you were like, Christopher probably did this to the human. And now you're like turning it around because you're seeing his face and how he looks like a puppy and you're in love with him. Like, make up your mind. Do you hate the guy or do you love him? Because you're really confusing me as a reader. So then Christopher leaves and she's all worried about him. And then Robert comes back and then she's like, why don't you like me? And he basically thinks she's a vampire. And he's like, oh, I don't do that. I don't want to be friends with vampires. I'm only close to Christopher and Nisa because I know that they know Nicholas. And I'm like, okay, so he's after Nicholas too. Okay. And then we find out Robert's really tragic backstory, and that's his sister Christine went kind of insane because of the influence of Nicholas, and he is after Nicholas to kill Nicholas because of what he did to his sister. And then we find out that Christine did not like her name Christine anymore. She was using the name Kristen. So then I don't remember what happened, but Sarah ends up going to Nicholas's house alone, and then we find out that Nicholas is the twin of Christopher. And I'm just like, I kind of saw the twist that him and Christopher were related, but not twins. And then at this point, she couldn't fight Nicholas or kill him because he looked too much like Christopher. So then, I guess Christopher's there and he tells Nicholas not to hurt Sarah. And then Sarah ends up getting hurt, and then she ends up calling her sister Adriana, and then Adriana takes her to Karen's house. And she's like, I can't believe you. Why are you doing that? Blah, 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 blah. And then Nisa comes and she tells Sarah the truth about Nicholas. Then we find out that Nicholas actually murdered someone, or he was framed for murdering someone as a human. And Nisa was the reason he was transformed into a vampire. And then after Nicholas was transformed, he transformed Chris. So then I can't really remember what happened, but I do remember after her conversation with Nisa, she ends up going back to Nicholas's house to get more information. And then Nicholas invites her to this bash where they were going to have a fight. And he talks about how he's going to kill Adriana because she drew blood, and that she drew blood from Nicholas, and that gives him the okay to kill her. And I'm just like, why are they just standing around in houses talking? Like, this is really dumb. So then she ends up leaving, meeting up with Robert, going to meet Christine. We find out what happens to Christine. Nicholas comes with Nisa because Nisa came because she's like, I know what you're trying to do. And she realizes that Christine is like mind broken by a vampire, and the vampire wasn't Nicholas, it was Kalos. And then after that, Nicholas takes Christine back to his house to fix her. And then Sarah wakes up to her mother binding her powers or doing something to her, and is like, oh, you have this list of crimes and you're gonna have a trial. Regardless if you're my daughter or not, you are gonna be punished for being friends with vampires. So then Sarah ends up writing a letter apologizing to her mom and then running away to Nicholas's house, where we find out that he actually did fix Christine and she was no longer insane. We have no idea what happens to Kalos. And then her and Nicholas and Christopher end up getting into this argument. Nicholas ends up saying, Christopher, you're no longer a killer. What's wrong? We used to do everything together. This like point in the story where it seems very incestuous. And I'm like, skipping this. Skipping. So Nicholas talks Chris into biting Sarah, and they end up nearly killing her, and she ends up drinking his blood. And then because she's a witch, the blood is making her really sick. And then Adriana comes and she's like, oh my god, what did you do to my sister? She's a witch. You can't do that. And then Christopher's like, I know, I feel so guilty, I'm gonna turn her into a vampire. And Adriana's like, no, you can't do that, she's a witch. And he's like, would you rather she live or would you rather she die? And then Adriana's like, okay. And then she ended up leaving and crying and hoping that she never sees her sister, because she was going to kill her sister, and she hoped that her sister would kill herself, because witches rather die than become vampires. Sarah ends up waking up, she's a vampire, or she's dying, and then Christopher ends up like giving his blood back to her. She has a memory of Christopher and Nicholas and what happened. His thoughts intertwine with her thoughts, and then she saw how he saw her and how he was in love with her. And after she becomes a vampire, she realizes that she's not going to kill herself, because Nisa and Christopher showed her being a vampire doesn't make you a killer. You could be a vampire and not kill humans. You know, that basic ending where the hero realizes that they don't have to be like their enemy kind of ending, you know. Unfortunately, this book actually was not very interesting. I felt like Amelia wanted to write a high school romance, and then halfway through she remembered she was supposed to be writing about this badass vampire hunter. Everything fell in place for the hero, but it was too easy. Like, Nicholas fell into her lap. She didn't go out there to find him. Robert fell into her lap. She didn't go out there questioning people about Nicholas. Just everything just fell in her lap. And then everything that was happening to her just seems so like dominoes. That's what it felt like. And sometimes with stories, I do want the main character to have a flaw. I do want the main character to be like, oh, I can't do this. I need help. Or I want to see the main character grow relationships. Now, did have character growth because in the beginning of the story, she did not like vampires. And by the end of the story, she realized, hey, now that she's a vampire, vampires aren't that bad. Okay, that's growth. But we didn't see her actually grow her relationships because there was just a few moments that we see her with Nisa and Christopher, and then suddenly they're best friends. And it was like really confusing because I know it takes about 6 months for somebody to become friends with people. And it's like, this is really, really quick. And then I didn't like how in the beginning of the story, we're told that Nicholas, he is the one that she wants. He is the one that she is after. We don't see her go after Nicholas. We see things fall in place for her, and it's like like I would have really liked if she found out that somebody knew about Nicholas, especially Robert, that she would go out there and start having interviews or questioning people, or like, oh, I heard Nicholas is in town, let me go into town and see if people see him around here. And I don't like is how she had a clear target that is Nicholas, but didn't know how he looked. And you would think because of this information of vampires, that at least somebody has drawn him. I mean, he's not that old. It's indicated that he's about 60, 70 years old. Why did nobody ever draw him? Why wasn't there any evidence of how he looks or descriptions of how he looks? But we didn't get that either. It ended so abruptly, and I was like, is this really how it ends? Supposedly there's a second book that happens 24 hours right after Sarah is transformed, and it's about the sister. So I don't know if I'm going to read that or not because this book was just boring. After the first book, Demon in My View, you see that she has grown as a writer. But in this one, you don't really see any growth as a writer because she's still doing the same things we're being told. We are being told, we're not being explained. There's a lot of continuity errors. There was no mention of werewolves. We didn't get any information about the witches, even though the main character was a witch. There is no more talk about the mortal witches, the Trieste witches. If executed well, it could have been a very good way to introduce the world, because she introduced something really interesting, the Single Earth Hospital. That was actually really interesting, but she never really gives us a big description or an explanation on how it was made and who made this and anything like that. It was like, oh, this just exists. That's it. This just exists. The vampires, shapeshifters, and witches all want to live together in harmony because they don't like the old ways. That's it. We have no idea who created the hospital. We have no idea who's in charge of the hospital. We have no idea how all of these paranormal creatures came together to be like, hey, let's all be friends. We don't get that. And that's what I don't like about this version of Amelia's writing, is because there is a lot of things that she's throwing and no descriptions or history or anything, especially when we want it. And when we don't want it, she's telling us, oh, this character's name, this character's past, and it's like, And then Kalos, one of the characters that made Christine go insane, he is never brought up ever again. And he's not even killed or punished for what he has done to Christine. And it's like, I would really like to see what happened to him. But I have a feeling he might be in the next book, so that's why she didn't kill him off. I don't know. But the last story is Midnight Predator. And I'm just like, am I going to like that book? Because Midnight Predator was Baby Moo's favorite book. And now I'm just like, do I really want to read it? Yeah, so this is the end of the video. I am done. This is going to be one of the shortest videos that I have on my channel. If you guys have read the book, I would really like to hear your guys' opinion. Please leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe. Bye guys, see you next time.